Okay, apparently we're live, so I will now move the slightly delayed version of myself out of the way, so I'm distracted by my doppelganger of 10 seconds ago. Hi, I'm Gareth Hanrahan, the author of the Black Iron Legacy books from Orbit. So far there's the Gutter Prayer, the Shadow Saint, and coming out in May there is The Broken God, which is the third in the Not trilogy, because it's going to be 5 books, or so I hope. Anyway, I'm going to give you a brief reading from The Broken God, and then if there's time, there will allegedly be a Q&A session, or else a brief session of Darkness and Silence, whichever people prefer. So, for context, and for those who haven't read any of the books, it's a grimdark-esque fantasy series set in this world which is undergoing this catastrophic War of the Gods, called originally the Gods War. This little piece is from the perspective of the villain of the third book, The Broken God, this charming fellow called Artolo, who is a sort of former gang boss and enforcer. And in the second book, he has from the perspective of the main character of the books, Carolyn, this minor run-in with her. The incident has a much bigger effect on him, and in this bit he is reflecting on it while up to some of the stuff. So I shall charge ahead. Arturo runs his ghost fingers over the barrel of the gun. He flexes them to make sure they've got the strength and speed to pull the stiff trigger when the moment comes. He looks up the barren hillside and imagines Caroline Thay popping up from behind one of those rocks. Would shooting her be enough? The rifle's chambered with oversized Flisconic rounds, and the witch has woven spells around each bullet to make them even more potent. But no, shooting would be too quick and too painless. He wants something slower. Anyway, Caroline Thay isn't his quarry this day. The witch points at the slope. There's the shrine, she says, pointing with her armoured hand. She sounds breathless in the effort of weaving protective spells around Cholo. But this is dangerous work, the hunting of a god. The shrine on the shoulder of the rock of Ilberin is an ugly thing, squat and rough made, cut from the same stone as the mountain. There were other shrines and temples dedicated to the goddess of the mountain, but they're all gone now. The rising seas drowned most of them, and the Ishmirians defiled the rest. Yeah. This little shrine, high on the upper slopes, is perhaps the last. Artolo hesitates. You said that tearing down the shrine would provoke her. The witch shrugs. She's already provoked. She's already active. Demolishing the shrine will make it harder for her to reform coherently. She'll come back, even more disorganized. Speaking of the goddess. Artolo raises the rifle, pressing his eye to the scope. He trains it on the shrine. There's a statue there, depicting the goddess Usheret. The statue is beautiful, a work of ecstatic devotion, every careful chip with the chisel a prayer. It depicts a young woman, tall and athletic, defiant as the mountain, Usheret before the war. We better be quick, says the witch, before she finds someone to saint. No doubt there are many souls among the survivors of Ilberin who know the rites and prayers to please Usheret and to attract the attention of the goddess. If the whirling pattern of Usheret alights on some compatible soul, that'll be trouble Artolo doesn't need, especially his great uncle on his way back to inspect the Iliastra refinery. He sweeps the scope right and left, up and down the slope. Other than a few lazy whirls of dust, there's no movement on the blasted landscape. Nothing, he mutters. The bitch must be over on the west side of the rock. You're thinking like a mortal, replies the witch. Her armoured suit whirs as she surveys the landscape. Ushret is everywhere on the mountain. She is the mountain. We need to get her to concentrate her being, make herself manifest, and then you shoot her. The other 2 riflemen on either side of Artolo signal their acknowledgement. When the goddess Ushret was the height of her power, she would have shrugged off attacks with weapons like these. But like the other gods of Ilberin, she was broken by the attack of the sacred realm. She's nothing but a mindless god husk now, greatly diminished, and soon she'll be diminished again. Artolo grunts. He checks his gun again, checks his fingers. There was a time when he'd have laughed in the face of a broken little goddess like Usheret, laughed, then shot her. But he's not laughing now. Martain, he calls. His Lieutenant Dal Martain turns and hurries over to Artolo. Aye, sir? Take 4 men. Blow up that shrine. And be on your guard. This will call her, the witch says. I've set up trigger wards, adds the witch. They'll go off before she manifests. That'll give you a little warning. How much warning? Asks Martain. Better than none, but not by much. My life is in your hands, boss, says Martain, shooting a sidelong glance at Artolo's gloved fingers. That word is insolence, and Martain's only Ashtana. He doesn't get to speak out of line. Go, snarls Artolo. Martain picks 4 men from the gaggle of beaters and sentries they brought this not quite God-forsaken hillside, and they begin their slow ascent, carrying a bundle of alchemical explosives. They walk gingerly over the unstable rocks, avoid the tangles of dead thorn bushes, flinch at every shift in the wind. Some of them look back, as if worried they're being abandoned on this cursed hillside, as sacrifices to Asheret. Martain, to his credit, never looks back. Artolo is still not completely sure about Martain, but it's obvious the man has ambitions beyond this ruined island. Most of the other survivors just stumble around, hollow and confused, unable to reconcile the memories of what Ilberin was with what it's become. They cling to what can be salvaged from the past, as if they can wait out the destruction. Artolo has seen survivors out of Ilberin City dragging furniture with them, as if the floodwaters might soon recede and they can return to their homes. Trying to find some government official to complain to, when there hasn't been a functioning government in Ilberin in months. Wasting food and children. There's no hope of them seeing the next year. Idiots, all of them. Martain's not like that, reflects Artolo. Maybe it's the mark of a well-travelled man. Seeing the world gives a breadth of vision that's necessary to survive. You learn there are possibilities elsewhere, and there's no sense tethering yourself to a dead cause, a dead past. There are always new lands to conquer. You travelled before I found you, yes. Yes, he mutters to the witch. I did, she says. All over the south. Then up through the trading cities. Nearly went to the archipelago. Ended up in Guerdon instead. She's distracted, working her magic. He should pay attention himself. The goddess could manifest at any moment. The glow of the warding runes laid down by the witch is unchanged. Martain and his men have nearly reached the shrine. Artolo's mind returns to Carolyn. She deserves a slow death at his hands. Yes, it'll have to be with his hands. She wasn't the one who cut off his fingers. That was a punishment decreed by great uncle, but it was her fault. Curse the gods or their fucking mad blessings. Handing out power on a whim, or according to some twisted philosophy that means nothing in the real world, disgusts him. Power should go to those strong enough to claim it and brave enough to use it. When great uncle punished him, hard as it was, it made sense. He'd failed the dragon, so he'd suffered. Not because of some nonsensical sin, not because the gods were randomly cruel, and not because of some heavenly war. No, the dragons knew how the world really worked. Once you stripped away all the pretense, all the holy scriptures and divine commandments. You were strong, or you suffered. Ilberin was his proof of that. This land of crushed and broken gods that the wish or strength left them to spawn a saint. Lawless and godless. Too many people here, not enough food. There's only one way off Ilberin, and Artolo controls it. He can reward the worthy, the ones with the courage and sense and strength to become Ashtana, and the others will suffer. He'll make Carolyn suffer. He'll bury her in this mountain. There must be hidden caves in the depths of the rock, cracks and crevasses where he can entomb her alive, down in the darkness, surrounded by stone, the roots of the thorn bushes pushing to the flecking stickiness of her eye sockets, drinking her soul. That's not my thought, he realizes. The warding runes flare, the ground shakes. The goddess is right below them. The witch senses it too, but she's clumsy in her articulated armor, too slow to react. Artolo grabs her and sprints forward as the hillside explodes behind him. He shouts a warning, but is lost in the thunder of the eruption. Boulders crash around him. Dust billows up, and through the choking clouds he sees the goddess. He tries to bring the long rifle to bear, but she's too close. Witless, broken, but cunning like a fox. The goddess recognized the long guns and knew they were a danger to her. The goddess is a leafless tree, barren and bare, twisting in the force of some unseen gale. But every time she bends, every time her long tangled arms reach down, they come tripping with the entrails of one of Artolo's men. She shakes her arms, scattering the gore like dew, and green shoots begin to sprout across the mountainside. Bits of rifle and rifleman land in front of Artolo, both horribly mangled. His ghost fingers close on the trigger. The recoil hammers through his body and tears every old wound. He feels it in his finger stumps, in the belly wound, and in his spine. The flash blinds him, his nose filled with the caustic stink of sulphur and phlogiston. Usheret roars in pain. The blast catches her in the chest, nearly severing one arm. She comes running towards him, sliding. He's standing in the path of a landslide. Torn fingers reach for him and stop. Usheret's frozen, held paralyzed by the witch's sorcery. A cage of ebony lightning flickers around the goddess, tendrils flickering and snatching at the human-shaped assembly of rock and dirt that makes up Usheret's form. I can't hold her, groans the witch. Unearthly light blazes from every joint of the armor. Black liquid drips from the witch's wrists, sizzles on the ground. Every syringe in her armor clicks into position, pumping drugs into the witch's sorcery-riddled body. If it were not for the rigidity of the locked armor, she would be writhing in agony from the arcane backlash. Artolo draws his dragon-tooth knife. The blade is blunt, but still got power. He leaps onto the back of the frozen goddess, drives the blade like a chisel into the wound, cleaving the arm from the body. The arm falls apart, dissolving into its components in a rain of stones and roots and rot. The knife breaks the spell too, freeing Usheret. She crumbles, hunching over, keening like a wounded beast. Turning, she scrambles away from Artolo, looping up the hillside towards the shrine. Her monstrously long strides carry her way across the mountain. If the goddess escapes, she can draw power from the shrine to heal herself. Maybe come back and hunt them down for profaning her mountain, or go and find a potential saint. Hold her again, he orders the witch. I might not be able to, the witch whispers, but she tries anyway. She extends her hand, chants the spell again, and again the goddess is caught mid-stride, paralyzed by the spell. Bolts of arcane energy leap from the witch's body to the soil, and there's a smell of burning flesh. Artolo ignores it. He cups his hands, shouts an order. Martine! Bring the explosives back down here! Quick! He can't see Martine in the dust of confusion, but a few moments later there's a flash, a roll of thunder, a rain of stone. The witch collapses at his feet, gasping in relief. As the smoke clears, the ruin of the goddess becomes apparent. A blackened thing that someone recalls a woman, lying at the bottom of a fresh scar on the mountainside. Artolo marches across the hillside, stepping over the remains of his soldiers. He ignores the witch's whimpering behind him. There's a job to do first. He climbs down to the hot pit, holding his breath to ward off the acrid fumes. The withered god husk raises the stump that used to be her head, and for a moment he sees the statue, the girl from the shrine, superimposed over the ruined form of Usheret. Her expression hasn't changed. There's no pleading for mercy, no fear, just defiance. Artolo's dagger is blunt, so it takes him several long, lung-searing minutes to saw through the torn root sinews of her neck, to cut through the mud flesh and part the stone vertebrae. Fuck saints and fuck gods. Right. Hope you enjoyed that. There was a went a bit faster than expected. So we have a few minutes for questions if there's anyone there who wishes to ask a question. Vaguely comprehensible. It's hard. They're a fairly complex and dense book, so it's hard to pull one self-contained chunk out of them. Questions, what made me choose a particular passage? Mainly because I like reading Artolo's voice, because he is just so unlike other characters that he's absolutely irredeemably violent and nasty and bitter. And it's always a training when writing and just when reading to sort of let go and have a character who is completely untrammeled and just does and says exactly what he feels and thinks all the time. Who's my favorite character in my series? There's a character in the first book, Saint Alina, who's sort of a fan favorite, who is this she's this old semi-retired, or sorry, jaded hero who has everyone else is running around going, oh my god, the world's about to end, and she's going this is my my 6th or 7th apocalypse, calm down, let's have a drink first. She was always fun to write. One of my huge interests as well is just world building and basically taking weird, surreal, fantastic elements and mashing them up against fairly serious, mundane aspects of mundane politics. So it was like writing Kelkin, who's the the quasi-Churchill-esque politician in the series, because he gets to make long speeches and or be cranky about the political impact of gods and weirdness and sorcery. Are there any more? The other thing I'm doing in addition to the Black Iron Legacy is my sort of day job is writing tabletop role-playing games, which I've done quite a lot of. One of the major ones I did recently was, on my shoulder here as well, the Dracula dossier, which is our rewrite of Bram Stoker's Dracula into a spy dossier, which is part of a major campaign. And I'm currently working on some stuff for the Lord of the Rings based role-playing game. And getting more fantasy stuff. My writing process, how do we read political intrigue? I said my day job is role-playing games, so I'm very, very good at, or very, very experienced anyway, at world building and setting up different factions and different groups who will have conflicting goals, and also extrapolating what the effect of some fantastic addition will be to a setting. So, for example, in the Black Iron Legacy books, there are these creatures called Talamen, which are these sort of wax golem things created from the bodies of criminals, who are used by the alchemists as their enforcers and sort of quasi-police force. So a lot of that would basically you take that idea and then run through, okay, how would that work logistically? What does a living candle monster need to day-to-day existence? How would that in this case, because they're created from the bodies of condemned thieves, that sort of brings in a whole question of okay, how many Talon could there conceivably be in the city? What's what's the rate of execution? Are there given the conduct of execution, what's the legal standing of them? Are they the people they used to be legally? Who controls them? Who's in charge of them? What happens when one goes rogue? Who's in charge of that? How do various other groups feel about these things, because they're giving such power to the alchemists, because they're basically letting the alchemists take over the city's police force and the political strength that comes with that. And also because in the backstory of the city, it was the city state, so basically there's no army. There's the police force taking over the army are there going to be tensions there as this, like, once fairly significant institution is undermined by the presence of these wax monsters. So basically, my writing process is coming up with lots of weird ideas and then seeing how they sort of clash and bounce and spark, and then trying to find protagonists who will fit in and have interesting perspectives on those events. At least for the secondary characters. My main protagonist, honestly, what I did was I had a character. I said I'm very experienced at world building for tabletop games. So when I was actually writing a novel, I wanted a character who would basically act almost like a tabletop protagonist and just keep acting and basically keep making decisions. Because when I first started trying to do novels, I had very, very passive protagonists because I was waiting for the players to take action, and there weren't any players. So basically, to come up with the protagonists who basically leap into the story feet first, which is where Caroline Tay came from. Which actually connects back to reading, because as I said, she, in almost offhanded fashion, deals with Artolo in book 2, and like at that point she's very, very powerful and sort of like he'll sort of swat him aside, and then in book 3 she's lost that power and she runs into him again, and suddenly she's sort of dealing with the aftermath of her impetuous decisions in beating up this gang lord. Another 4 or 5 minutes, let's say. Any more questions? Oh yes, the my very, 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 very long Twitter thread where I went through there's books called The History of Middle-earth, which are basically how Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings. And I basically took the 4 books that go through his endless drafts on the actual Lord of the Rings books, and sort of follow them through from a writer's perspective, trying to retrace the sort of character decisions he made. And that's all up on Twitter, and I shall put a link there in a moment. What's going on next? The Broken God, book 3 is out in May. I've also got some Warhammer fiction for Black Library coming out at some point. I know there's a story going into White Dwarf sometime over the summer, so it's really got to be that. And the next role-playing book that's coming out for me is a campaign for the Fold Delta Green, which is this 1960s Spies versus Cthulhu setting. And that's the Borellus Connection, which is basically the French Connection meets Cthulhu. And that should be out later this year. I'm not quite sure when, but that was a massive book and great fun to research. Right, there, and the link is link to my Twitter, and also the link to that long Tolkien thread. Actually, 4 long Tolkien threads. If those are interested, I've lost the power of speech entirely. I should probably also thank Warren Con for the opportunity to pop in and stare awkwardly at my webcam for a few minutes in this like eerie silence, punctuated only by the screams of children somewhere in the background. I'm not sure if you're able to hear them, but I assure you they were screaming. Okay, and I think we're at the 5-minute mark now, so I shall say thank you all very much, and farewell.